What's up guys, Chris Irvin the Ketologist coming at you from Austin, Texas. This video is about how to combat brain fog and other keto flu symptoms. So a lot of times when people are starting the ketogenic diet, they talk about brain fog and they talk about keto flu symptoms. And I think a lot of times the common misconception is that there's nothing you can do about this. These are symptoms of carbohydrate withdrawal. And the truth is that that's not the case. There's actually a lot of things you can do to combat brain fog and other keto flu symptoms, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So the first reason why you have brain fog, and I think this is probably 90% of the cases for most people out there, is that it's electrolyte deficiency. That's why you're experiencing brain fog on a ketogenic diet. So when we stop eating carbohydrates, our blood glucose levels lower, and this causes our insulin levels to lower, which ends up leading to us excreting more water. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but what that does do is it leads to electrolyte deficiencies. And when we're deficient in electrolytes like magnesium, potassium, and especially sodium, it can definitely lead to a lot of keto flu symptoms, especially brain fog. So the good news about this is there's something you can do about it. You can actually replenish your electrolytes through using whole foods or supplementation. I think for most people, supplementation is probably necessary because I think it's hard for you to get enough electrolytes in your diet through whole foods. A couple really good sources of foods that have good electrolytes in them are, salting your foods for one. Avocados are a really great source of potassium. Mixed nuts can be a really great source of electrolytes, especially if they're dry roasted and salted. But outside of that, I think it's really important that we focus on doing supplementation because I think it's hard for us to get the appropriate amount of electrolytes without that. So first thing you can do if you have brain fog or other keto flu symptoms is replace your electrolytes. The second big one that kind of ties into that is dehydration. So like I just said, when you are cutting your carbohydrates out and your insulin levels are lowering, you're excreting more water, and that leads to dehydration. And when you're dehydrated, your brain is not operating to its maximum capacity. And neither is the rest of your body either. So when we start talking about some of those other keto flu symptoms like fatigue and muscle soreness and muscle cramps and things like that, those are also a result of dehydration. So that's something that we need to be really focused on, is drinking a lot of water, especially when you're first starting a ketogenic diet. That rapid weight loss that you see when you first start keto, a lot of that is water loss. So we need to make sure that we're replenishing that and we're not being too dehydrated. The third reason why a lot of people are suffering from brain fog and things like that is low ketone uptake in the brain. So when we're consuming a carbohydrate-based diet, carbs are our primary fuel source, and our brain has a massive energy demand. So glucose from carbohydrates is the primary energy source that our brain is using. Now, when we restrict those carbohydrates, the good thing is that our body will produce ketones, which are an alternative fuel source for the brain to use, and actually a better fuel source for the brain to use. But when you first start a ketogenic diet, the brain uptake of ketones may be a little bit limited. It's something that your body has to become accustomed to. We have to upregulate transporters that allow for these ketones to be taken into the cells, and that's one of the reasons why you can be experiencing these keto flu symptoms. Now, what can you do about that? Well, one of the biggest things that you can do is you can continue following the keto diet. So as you continue to get more adapted, you're going to be able to improve your brain's ability to utilize ketones. Exercise is another big one. So there's actually been some research out there to show that when you're exercising, you can increase the uptake of ketones into your brain. So that's another great way to do it. And then I also think that exogenous ketones can be something that can be useful here because they can provide your body with more ketones. And we kind of know that when you have more ketones available, we can upregulate these transporters maybe a little bit quicker. So I think that can be pretty beneficial, but we'll get more into exogenous ketones in a couple points here. But the thing I want to stop in the middle here and touch on is that when I'm getting into these other things like 3 through 5 on the reasons why you have brain fog, these things are not as common as the first two, which were electrolyte deficiency and dehydration. I think that 90% of the time, just to reiterate on that, that's the reason why you're experiencing these things. But these other things like low ketone uptake in the brain and the other two that I'm going to get into are also, can also be contributors, but not as common as, the first two that we talked about. So the fourth reason why people are suffering from brain fog and other keto flu symptoms is lack of calories. And this is especially true for symptoms like fatigue or poor recovery in the gym, lack of strength, things like that. A lot of that is a result of not enough calories. So a lot of times we focus on restricting calories too much, especially when we first start keto. And like I said, when you first start a ketogenic diet, you're cutting out the glucose. So you're missing out on one of the fuel sources. you are getting accustomed to burning fat, but for some people, this takes some time. So, depending on where you're at and what your diet was like before you started keto, it actually may take you a little bit of time to become accustomed to burning fat for energy. So I think it's essential during this time that we get enough calories in our diet to provide our body and nourish our bodies. I also think that too often people are really focused on cutting out certain foods from their diet, but they fail to remember that we also need to replace those with the right foods, and we need to nourish our bodies. So a lot of times these symptoms are a result of not having enough calories. And another reason for this is that keto is a satiating diet. You are more full when you follow a ketogenic diet. So for some people, you end up incidentally eating a lower amount of calories. Maybe you're trying intermittent fasting, maybe you're not eating in between meals anymore, and there's nothing wrong with those things, but those can lead to low calorie intake. So I think that if you're experiencing brain fog and you're experiencing fatigue and things like that, and you know that your calories are very low, it may be time to bump those things up a little bit. And then the fifth and final reason why I think some people are experiencing brain fog and other keto flu symptoms is simply not enough ketones. So I kind of alluded to this earlier in the video, but when we first start a ketogenic diet, it takes our body time, especially like I said, depending on where you're coming from with your previous diet and how long you've been following it for. It takes time for our body to get accustomed to burning fat. It also takes time for our body to get accustomed to producing the ketones and utilizing them. So we know that we can get into some state of ketosis within even just 10 to 12 hours of carbohydrate restriction or calorie restriction. But for us to be actually utilizing those ketones is a different story. And for some people, it takes a while for you to get ketones elevated to the degree that you need them to be to provide fuel to your brain. So this is another time where exogenous ketones and MCTs can be beneficial. So the MCTs are a fat that are a little bit unique. They are digested differently, and they're actually the only dietary fat that you can consume that will be converted to ketones in your body. So it actually leads to a natural increase in ketones. And the same thing with exogenous ketones, except for when you take exogenous ketones, they're not being converted to ketones in the body. They're just being absorbed and leading to an increase in your blood ketones. And the reason why this is beneficial as it relates to brain fog is because we know that our brain's intake of ketones is proportional to their availability in the blood. So if your ketones are very low when you're first starting keto and you're experiencing some of those brain fog symptoms, using some things like MCTs or exogenous ketones can help boost those things up a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean that you should be relying on these things, and doesn't mean that these should become staples of your diet and that you're always going to have to use them. But the point here is that when you first start keto, if these keto flu symptoms are very intense, you may not stick to the diet. So using these supplements can be really important for bridging the gap and helping you become adapted, so then you can start experiencing the true benefits of being in ketosis. So those are the 5 things I think that people need to consider if they're experiencing brain fog or other keto flu symptoms. A lot of it is related to that. Like I said at the beginning of the video, most cases it's electrolyte deficiency and dehydration. That's something that everybody should be focusing on a ketogenic diet, is replenishing those things, drinking enough water. But then, these other things I talked about in this video can also be contributors to that. So those are some actionable takeaways that you can take. If you are new to the ketogenic diet and you're experiencing those things, try these things. And allow yourself time to adapt. Don't get discouraged just because you're not experiencing these eye-opening moments of being in ketosis like a lot of people report. Everybody's a little bit different. For some people, it can take a little bit longer to get adapted and to start feeling the benefits of ketosis. So don't become discouraged. So that's it for this video, guys. If you guys like this video and you found it helpful, please share it with somebody. If you know somebody who's starting keto and they're talking a lot about brain fog, let them know that they don't have to deal with these things, or are things that they can do to combat them to make this time more manageable as they're becoming adapted to the diet. If you guys have comments or questions about this, please comment them below. And then, as always, if anybody has any other topics that they would like me to talk about in future videos, please comment them below as well so I can get those pumped out for you guys. All right, thanks a lot, guys.